in the infinite darkness of the universe, there was a corridor as old as the stars, mysterious and ageless, the Timeless Corridor. This place was once an anomaly that held the greatest secrets of the universe. It had neither a beginning nor an end, and it had swallowed countless civilizations, planets, and even time itself. No one had ever escaped this corridor, and its tales lived only in whispers. In a void outside of time, somewhere unknown, a man took a breath. His eyes slowly opened, but it took him a few seconds to realize the emptiness around him. He had an awareness of himself, but didn't know who he was. His name, his past, his memories, everything was gone. He only felt one thing, a deep, suffocating loneliness. The man's eyes caught a shape in the void, emerging from formlessness, a small beam of light. At first, he thought it was just a hallucination because light had no meaning in this emptiness. But the light grew, expanded, and eventually took the form of a door. The man, without thinking, took a step forward, drawn to the light's pull as the weight of the void pressed him from all sides. When he entered the corridor, it felt as if he had passed not through a door, but through the very fabric of time. He found himself in a place he did not know, but felt oddly familiar. The corridor's walls shifted with every step, sometimes appearing as holographic images, at other times as endless shelves, or even as giant screens showing the birth of stars. Every corner of the timeless corridor seemed to carry the lost memories of the universe. He walked slowly. One of the images on the wall caught his attention. A woman. Someone he didn't know, but something inside him told him he did. Her smile echoed in the deepest corners of his subconscious. The man reached out to her, but something stopped him. The image vanished with a sudden scream. It was replaced by another scene, where the same woman, her eyes filled with sorrow, stared into an empty space. At that moment, he felt as if a large part of him was missing. Who was this woman? The corridor changed again, and the surroundings took on a dreamlike reality. Now, he was standing on a cold metal floor. He felt neither weight nor the familiar pull of gravity. It was as if he was disconnected from his body, but he was still aware. The only question that echoed in his mind was, "Who am I?" A voice rang out, high-pitched and mechanical. "Who you are no longer matters. Your arrival here is no coincidence. Your memories brought you to this point." The man turned his head, but saw no one. The void stared at him, cold and merciless. Yet the voice triggered something inside him. Memories he couldn't fully recall, but could still feel the presence of were rising to the surface. Shattered images flashed through his mind. A children's park, an old book, the window of an abandoned house, and that woman. The woman again. The corridor's walls changed once more. Now in front of him, a structure resembling a giant clock tower appeared. This tower seemed to symbolize the infinity of time. Each gear, each tick, reminded the man of what he had lost. He quickened his pace, for something inside the tower was waiting, an answer or a solution. As he entered the tower, the texture of time shifted completely. Seconds turned into minutes, and minutes into eternity. With every step, the ground beneath his feet trembled, and the clocks inside the tower ticked and talked, each tick returning a memory, each talk wiping away another truth. And finally, when he reached the top of the tower, he saw a chair. On that chair sat a man, himself, or at least a version of him. "This isn't possible," he said, his voice turning into a desperate whisper. He was staring at his own face, older, more worn out, but it was him. The older man opened his eyes and smiled gently at him. "In the timeless corridor, anything is possible. Your greatest battle will be with yourself," said the old man. The man took a step back. "How can this be?" "You're me," he said, his breath coming in short gasps as he struggled with the questions swirling in his mind. The older man nodded. "You've forgotten your past. You entered this corridor because you were searching for what was lost. But you need to remember that there's no escape from time. Here, you are everything and nothing at once." The man looked into his own reflection's eyes, and felt a deep tremor inside. This corridor was beyond time. Here, anything was possible. Memories, truths, even the very essence of a person. But the real question was, what was real in this corridor? As he took another step, everything around him shifted once again. The ground disappeared beneath him, and he found himself falling into the void. The last sound echoing in his mind was the old man's sharp, wise voice. Everything forgotten is remembered one day, but everything remembered comes with a cost. The man fell, but this time, the fall wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. As the man fell into the void, the strange weight pulling on his body grew heavier and heavier. It was as if every cell, every particle of his being was being pulled back, but his mind was moving forward. As he continued to float in the darkness, he realized something. He was no longer just a part of his body, but a part of the corridor itself. In the timeless corridor, the rules of reality bent, altering his perception of time, space, and even his own existence. This fall had no end, but at the same time, it felt like it could stop at any moment. Finally, he felt his body hit something. But this collision wasn't physical, it was more like a mental jolt. His eyes snapped open, and the world around him revealed itself. He had reached the center of the timeless corridor. This center felt like both the beginning and the end of everything. Around him were massive pillars, stretching up into an infinite sky. These pillars were adorned with spirals, symbolizing time. The sky was ever-changing. One moment, a dark void, and the next, filled with sparkling stars. And in the very center stood a colossal monument, the Well of Memories. He walked toward the well, his steps slow and cautious. His mind felt like it was playing tricks on him. With each step, a new memory flickered, but he couldn't grasp any of them. When he finally reached the edge of the well, he looked down. The well seemed endless, just like the corridor. But in the dark depths, there was something. Something was calling him. A voice echoed again, but this time, it was not the voice of the old man, but of a young child. In the depths of the well lies the truth that awaits you. But finding that truth means accepting to remember. And everything you remember will cost you a little more of yourself. The man took a deep breath and stepped forward. As his feet touched the edge of the void, gravity suddenly reversed. He wasn't being pulled down, but up. Instead of sinking into the well, he was being drawn out of it. His eyes closed as the world spun around him, and he lost consciousness. But deep within his mind, something began to stir. An explosion of memories reverberated inside his brain. He was sitting in a small room at an old wooden table. The room was plain, with walls painted a faded yellow, showing the marks of time. On the table was a notebook, its cover worn and old. The man opened the notebook. The writings inside were chaotic, messy, and unreadable. Yet each line sparked a memory inside him. The first memory, a children's park. The warm sunlight bathed the children playing there, their cheerful laughter filling the air. The man sat on a bench in the park, next to a woman. That woman, yes, she was there again, the same woman. He didn't remember her name, but her laugh, her voice echoed in his mind. She turned to him and said something, but the words were blurred, just like the other memories he was trying to recall. The woman's eyes, deep and full of meaning, locked on to his. For a moment, their hands touched, and time seemed to stop. In that endless moment, the man's heart raced. There was something, a connection between them. But what was it? When he opened his eyes again, he found himself outside the well of memories. His breathing was fast and uneven, his heart pounding in his chest. Why had he remembered that memory? Who was that woman, and why did she feel so familiar to him? He needed answers, but every memory hurt him. As his memory surfaced, his very existence seemed to unravel. At that moment, he heard footsteps near the well. When he turned his head, he saw himself. Same age, same appearance. But this version of him had eyes full of darkness, like a shadow. This man represented everything he had forgotten. You're me," said the man, his voice echoing in the void. His reflection nodded. "I am the part of you that you forgot. Every memory will destroy you a little more. But if you want to find the truth that lies at the bottom of this well, you must keep remembering. Because without facing your past, you won't find your future. The man took a deep breath. He was scared. He was scared of himself. But he had to face this fear. He had to remember. He took another step forward and moved closer to the edge of the well. Remembering will destroy you even more, said his reflection. But maybe that destruction will lead to a rebirth. He looked into the depths of the well one more time. This time, there was no fear, only determination. He knew there would be a price for everything he remembered. But the truth always came with pain, didn't it? And those who seek the truth must endure the pain. When he looked into the well once more, this time, he jumped. It felt like his mind had detached from his body. As he fell, each memory, piece by piece, flooded into his mind. The more he remembered, the more of himself he lost. But at the same time, something was falling into place. There was a purpose in this corridor, and that purpose was to find his lost memories. When the man plunged into the well, the surrounding darkness no longer felt unfamiliar. Floating in this endless void, the fear of losing himself was now matched by a deep curiosity. This fall lasted much longer. His eyes were closed, but his mind was awake. He knew now that losing pieces of himself was inevitable, but he also realized something else. Each part he lost brought him one step closer to the truth. When he finally opened his eyes, this time he found himself in a world that seemed clearer, yet fractured. The ground, the sky, and everything suspended in the air had blended together, with layers of time stacked on top of each other. One moment, he swore he was in a forest. The next, he stood in a city square. And a few seconds later, he was on the cold metal floor of an old space station. This place was a labyrinth of time. Every step brought him into a different era, a different world. But he wasn't alone in this strange labyrinth. There were others like him. He saw figures moving in the distance. These figures didn't look entirely human, though. They were more like beings trapped in time. Their semi-transparent bodies drifted toward him with uncertain movements, as if they themselves didn't know what they were doing. As they came closer, the man realized that these shadows had once been people. Were they the souls trapped in this labyrinth? Victims of time? Perhaps they were those who had entered the corridor long before him. As one of the figures approached, the man's eyes locked on it. Its face was blurred, but at the same time, familiar. That woman. It was her again. Eleanor, whispered a voice in his mind. The name suddenly appeared, as if he had always known it. The woman's name was Eleanor. His heart began to beat faster. That name echoed deep in his soul. It was a name he had forgotten, but needed to remember. Eleanor looked at him, but her eyes were empty. He wanted to call out to her, but something held him back. Slowly, the woman retreated, disappearing into the folds of time. The man took a step forward, trying to follow her, but the ground beneath him became slippery, and reality twisted once more. The labyrinth of time was pulling him deeper, down a path of no return. But he didn't give up. This time, he began to run. With every step, the ground changed, and the places around him shifted, but he was determined not to lose sight of Eleanor. Memories swirled like storm in his mind. Eleanor. Who was this woman? What kind of connection did he have with her? That face, that name. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't complete the picture. The labyrinth was toying with him, twisting his memories. When he turned a corner, he found himself in a city square. Old, stone buildings surrounded the place, cold and abandoned. There was no sun, only a gray sky. But in the center of the square stood a clock tower. This tower was something he remembered. A voice echoed in his head. The clock tower, it said. This place was connected to Eleanor. He had seen her here before. His steps quickened. As he approached the clock tower, a strange feeling grew inside him. It was as if every step peeled back another layer of reality. When he reached the base of the tower, he pushed the door open. It creaked as it swung inward, revealing a dark passageway inside. A spiral staircase descended into the darkness. His mind told him to stop, but his body knew it had to keep going. With each step down, time grew heavier. His mind was once again flooded with memories. This time, he heard the voice of a child. The child's voice called to him from afar, echoing, "Daddy." He froze. His heart almost leaped out of his chest. The child's voice triggered something deep inside him. This voice, echoing in his mind, was a forgotten truth. Something he didn't want to remember. Something he wasn't sure he could face. He continued to descend. The path became darker and more suffocating. Finally, he reached a door. This door felt like a gateway to something beyond reality. He knew that once he crossed it, something would change inside him. He opened the door and stepped inside. But this room was no ordinary room. Inside, the walls were lined with mirrors. Every mirror reflected a different memory. In one, there was a small child. In another, Eleanor. And in yet another, the old man from the tower was there again. But the most striking reflection was in the large mirror at the center, where his own reflection stared back at him. But this reflection was different. The reflection was filled with darkness. Its eyes were empty, like the figures he had encountered in the labyrinth. "Do you really want to remember?" asked a voice. The voice came from very close, perhaps from the reflection, or maybe from his own mind. The man approached the mirror. As he stared into his reflection, he felt a deep darkness inside. He was confronting himself. But this was more than just a physical confrontation. It was a meeting with the darkest corners of his mind. Memories, things he had buried deep in his subconscious, were surfacing one by one. Suddenly, the reflection moved. It reached out and touched the mirror. And at that moment, everything changed. His mind exploded with a surge of memories. They played like a shattered film reel, flashing rapidly before his eyes. Eleanor, the clock tower, that child, all of it was coming together. Deep within his mind, he felt a great truth emerging. This corridor wasn't just a gateway. This corridor was a labyrinth of his own subconscious. To go beyond time was to find himself. What he had been searching for was his own existence. His reflection gave him one last look before dissolving into the darkness. In that moment, only one truth remained. He had to find Eleanor. Something about her was the key to both his past and his future. As he took a step back from the mirror, all of the mirrors around him began to shatter, one by one. The ground trembled, the walls shook, and once again, the timeless corridor shifted its reality. This time, he didn't know where he was going, but it didn't matter anymore. He would find Eleanor, and he would reclaim his memories. The timeless corridor once again bent the boundaries of reality, drawing the man deeper inside. The world around him was breaking apart once more. The process that began with the shattering mirrors had now completely fractured his sense of reality. Everything was becoming a void once again, but this time the man felt different. Fear had been replaced with purpose. He had to find Eleanor, unlock the key to his past, and learn the truth. His eyes were closed, but his body felt heavier than ever. The void wasn't pulling him into the depths of darkness this time. Instead, a gentle breeze brushed against his face. He took a deep breath, and when he opened his eyes, he found himself in yet another place. But this time, it felt closer to his past. He stood by the edge of a lake. The water was so clear it looked like glass, but there was something strange about the surface. The lake shimmered like a mirror. When he looked into the water, he didn't see his reflection, but glimpses of his past. This was a place where memories took form. With every step he took, new images appeared on the lake's surface, drawing out memories from the deepest corners of his mind. The man walked slowly along the lake's edge. With each step, a new image appeared. In one, there was a small park, the same park. That child's voice echoed in his mind again, this time clearer. "Daddy." The voice triggered something deep in his chest. That child was a part of him, but this truth was still foggy in his mind. He leaned over the lake's surface. For a moment, he saw his face, but it twisted and became unrecognizable. He was struggling to remember who he was. Eleanor's name grew more important with every passing second. His connection to her was the key to this unsolvable puzzle. But who was Eleanor? Was she a lover? Or was their bond something deeper and more meaningful? Just then, the surface of the lake rippled. The ripple felt like the effect of a small stone thrown into the water. But this stone wasn't a physical object, it was a memory. From the depths of the lake, an image rose to the surface. Eleanor stood before him, the same face, the same deep gaze. But this time, the woman was speaking to him. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice trembling. Her eyes were looking at him, but there was still an emptiness. "I remember you, but I don't know who you are." The woman's reflection in the water responded, "Remembering me will save you, but everything comes with a price. Bringing back what you've forgotten will change you." The man felt the weight of her words. This act of remembering wouldn't just bring back his memories, it would change his entire existence. Eleanor's reflection slowly sank back into the lake. The man reached out to stop her from fading, but his hands grasped at empty air. The lake's surface returned to calm, and the image vanished. For a moment, he felt a great weight in his chest. This memory was unlocking the doors to a past he didn't even know belonged to him. But digging deeper into that past carried the risk of losing himself. Just then, a distant sound echoed. This time, it was the laughter of a child. The child's voice was calling him somewhere. He began to walk toward the source of the voice. The ground beneath his feet changed. He was no longer by the lake, but in an old city square. The buildings around him were crumbling, with dust and ash blown by the wind. The city was empty, abandoned, and forgotten. But in the middle of the square stood a child, a small boy, hands raised, staring at the sky. The man approached the child. His heart pounded, because this child felt familiar to him. The child turned to face him and smiled. His eyes carried the weight of a memory that had been lost for years. "Do you remember me?" the boy asked. The man froze. He looked at the child, but the pieces in his mind still hadn't fully come together. Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. The child lowered his head. "I'm a part of you. You forgot me, but now you're finding me again." The man took a deep breath. His mind was swirling with confusion. This child must be a part of his past. But which part? How was he connected to Eleanor? The boy began to walk toward an old building in the middle of the square. "Come, you're about to learn the truth," said the boy's voice, echoing. Hesitantly, the man followed the boy. As he stepped inside the building, the air grew heavy. Inside, it felt as though time had become stuck. Every corner of the room revealed another memory. Each room held a reflection of his past. The floor was worn, but with every step he took, something echoed in his mind. This place was the key to his past. The boy led him to a room. When he opened the door, the man saw a table inside. On the table was a notebook, its cover old and dusty. The man approached the notebook and picked it up. When he opened it, the pages were blank, but they carried a strange weight, as if every page contained an invisible memory. The boy sat down next to the table and looked at him. "This notebook is the record of the memories you lost. What is written here will take you back to your past, but each word will change you a little more." The man closed the notebook and took a deep breath. He had to fill this notebook, but he knew the cost of every word. The more he remembered, the more he would lose. His very existence would dissolve within this labyrinth of time. Just then, the boy spoke once more. "If you want to find Eleanor, you must fill this notebook. Everything about her is hidden in here." The man opened the notebook, and as he stared at the first page, the memories in his mind, like shattered images, began to come together. His hand reached for the pen. When he wrote the first word, the world shook once more. He was remembering. Each word was a memory. Each word brought back a truth. Deep within the timeless corridor, a truth was being revealed. But would this truth save him, or would it completely destroy him? The man's hand trembled as he gripped the pen. As he touched the first page of the notebook, it felt as if all of time's barriers had broken down. The moment the pen touched the paper, everything around him started to change. The room quaked, The floor beneath him disappeared, the walls shifted, and the entire world seemed to twist around him once again. The very fabric of time itself seemed to unravel with the movement of the pen. As he wrote the first word, a memory surfaced in his mind. He wrote her name, Eleanor. Suddenly, the void around him solidified, shaping itself into something new. This time, he was inside a home, a small, simple home. Wooden floors creaked softly underfoot, and a gentle light streamed in through the window. The place felt both familiar and distant at the same time. He reached out and ran his hand along the edge of the table in front of him. His mind was still adjusting to this new reality. Just then, he heard a sound, laughter from the kitchen. It was a sound he knew from somewhere deep inside him. "Eleanor," he whispered. A figure turned to face him, smiling, her eyes bright with joy. A woman stood at the kitchen counter. Eleanor, busy preparing something, looked up at him. "Coffee's ready, sleepyhead," she said playfully. But this memory, something about it felt off. The man's mind told him this couldn't be real. It was an illusion, wasn't it? The man tried to cling to this version of reality. He took a step toward Eleanor, but his feet felt heavy as if they were rooted to the ground. His mind was questioning whether this was truly happening. Eleanor continued to move around the kitchen, smiling, her laugh still ringing softly in the air. Yet, something in her expression was missing. The man looked closer and noticed a hollowness in her eyes. This wasn't a real Eleanor. This was just a reflection, a ghost of a memory. Something was wrong. This memory felt real, but he knew deep down that a part of it was missing. He needed to remember more. He had to write the next word in the notebook. Every word, every memory was taking him closer to the truth. But he also knew that each word would cost him a little more of himself. Even so, he had no choice. He had to know the truth. The man opened the notebook again, placing the pen against the page. He wrote the next word, Noah. As soon as he wrote the name, the world shifted again. This time, he found himself in a park. The same park from years ago, but now the details were clearer. He could see more of the trees, hear the birds chirping, and there, in the middle of the park, a small child was running around. The child laughed joyfully, playing without a care in the world. The man knew who this child was. No, the truth hit him all at once. Eleanor wasn't just a lover. She was the mother of his child. Noah was his son, his most important piece of his life. But why had he forgotten something so vital? Was his mind playing tricks on him? Or had the corridor pushed him so deep into his subconscious that even his most precious memories were lost? Noah ran toward him, laughing as he did. For a moment, the man bent down, ready to embrace his son. But just as his hands reached out to grab him, everything changed again. Noah's figure began to dissolve, like a mirage. The child disappeared into thin air, and the park around him faded away. Once again, the man found himself back in the cold, dark void of the timeless corridor. The man dropped to his knees, gasping. Every memory he recalled brought more pain. He had forgotten his own son. But why? What had happened that caused him to lose everything? This corridor, this place, had done something to him. It had taken his memories and buried them deep, forcing him to relive each one with agony. Now, every time a memory returned, it felt like a blade being driven into his soul. Yet he had no choice. Noah and Eleanor, they were the keys to everything. He took a deep breath and opened the notebook once more. Every memory was pulling him closer to the truth. He placed the pen against the paper again. This time, he wrote the word, home. The world shifted once more. This time, he stood in front of a small house, a simple, modest house. The door was made of old wood, and above it, a faded sign hung, reading, "Our Home." His memories came rushing back like storm. This house was where he and Eleanor had lived. This was where Noah had taken his first steps, where he had said his first words. But now, the house was abandoned, decaying. The door creaked open on rusty hinges. The man cautiously stepped inside. As he entered, he saw that time had ravaged everything inside. Dust covered the furniture, The walls were cracked and peeling, but the memories lingered. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. This place, once filled with life, now felt like a ghost of the past. When he opened his eyes, Eleanor was standing before him once again. This time, she was different. The emptiness in her eyes was gone. She looked at him with sadness, but also with understanding. "Why did you forget us?" Eleanor's voice was filled with sorrow as she spoke, her voice trembling slightly. The man staggered back, his heart pounding in his chest. "I didn't want to forget," he whispered. I don't know why everything disappeared." Eleanor took a step closer. "The truth frightens you. But in this corridor, there's no escaping the truth. The more memories you regain, the more you will lose. But remember this, we never forgot you." Her words struck him like a bolt of lightning. Eleanor and Noah's presence wasn't just in his memories. Somehow, they lived on in the depths of the timeless corridor. Yet, the cost of remembering them weighed heavier with every step. The man took a deep breath, closing his eyes as he held the notebook tightly. He knew he had one final step to take. He had to remember the truth, no matter what it cost him. He placed the pen against the paper for the last time. He knew there would be no turning back after this. He reached the end of the notebook. His hand trembling, he wrote the final word, truth.